Mr. Chairman, I believe we're live.
Okay, let's have a roll call. We'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Okay. Senator Ellis? Senator,
Excused.
excused, okay. Senator Garou?
Excused.
Senator Hicks?
Here.
Senator Kolb?
Present.
Senator Larson?
Here.
Representative Conrad?
Here.
Representative Larson?
Here.
Representative Nyman?
Excused.
Representative Summers?
Here.
Representative Yin?
Here.
Chairman Steinmetz?
Excused.
And Vice Chair Eklund?
Here.
Okay, Chairman Eklund, if I'm reading the joint committee rules correctly, in order to have a quorum, we need 4 senators, and we currently only have 3.
Okay. We're going to probably right away won't be voting on anything. We'll get into the votes a little bit later, I believe. Not much later, so I think we might try to get a hold of Senator Ellis. Or Senator Garou. Does anybody have their phone numbers? Would you try to text them?
I will reach out to Senator Garou.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair, I tried to, but I lost my phone yesterday. So if you guys can help me find it, I'll text them.
Okay. We've never been in a situation where we didn't have a quorum. I don't think. So the rules are they have to be half Senate and half House. We don't have enough with just the House members then.
No.
Fiddle. Okay.
So Chairman Eklund, do we have this is Representative Summers. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, it seems like there's a lot of informational stuff we could get out of the way, hopefully, and drag them in later. Or is that fair or not fair?
I think it is fair. The agenda had us voting in about an hour, less than an hour on some things. Well, it'd take a while to go through them too. Let's go ahead. We may change the agenda a bit. We'll start with what we have here at 135 project updates. We'll go ahead and work on that. And as we go along, if we have to vote on anything and we don't have the quorum established yet, then we'll wait until we do, I think. Okay. So the first item for our consideration is going to be brought to us by Chance Tavelli, and it's on the critical aging irrigation infrastructure assessment, level 1 study.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chase Tavelli with Wyoming Water Development Office. Update on the critical aging irrigation infrastructure study. We have now completed all 10 of the state meetings. Those were finished last year late. Attendance ranged anywhere from 14 in Lyman to 35 in Laramie. We met around the state, very selective areas to look at where there's a lot of irrigation and to try to be as regional as possible to accommodate as many people as we could. The meeting format was a consultant's approach.
Chairman Eklund?
Yes.
Chairman Eklund, this is Representative Summers.
Yeah.
Just, you know, since you do have maybe some time you need to kill a little bit. I don't know, but I know on the House side, there's at least 4 of us that are brand new members to Select Water, including myself. And I think there's a few that are brand new, probably to the Senate side. And I'm wondering, as we go into these projects that are going to be talked about, if the presenter could provide maybe just a shade background of where we are and whatever process we're in. I think it'll give the new members some context of what we're doing here. Just a suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good idea. I had kind of overlooked that. We do have pretty much a whole new committee with the representative. So with each presenter, if you want to just kind of slow down and give us a little bit of the history of it. Aging infrastructure probably is entirely new for everybody, but a couple of us, so.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hadn't thought of that. I agree completely. I apologize for having not thought of that. So the critical aging irrigation infrastructure study was kind of born out of the tunnel collapse. And it's my understanding that the legislators became very concerned about any other, it was referred to as ticking time bombs at the time that are out there around the state. So a study was born, $500,000 appropriation from the legislature last year. And we began a study, and we developed a scope of work to include project meetings. 10 of those meetings were to be in locations around the state of Wyoming to inform the general public, and we invited legislators and Water Development Commission commissioners to those meetings to explain the project, hear an update from different funding opportunities such as the Water Development Commission, the NRCS, and the Bureau of Reclamation. And then what we recently completed was a definition of criticality. And once we get criticality defined, we're going to rank these structures. And the structures, I'm going to go over that in a little bit. So, got hit. Okay, sorry. What our consultant is doing, their approach to the study is to take all of the existing information out of approximately 120 plus Water Development Commission publications, projects that we've completed, as well as talk to irrigators around the state, hydrographer commissioners, NRCS personnel, conservation districts, and then we're trying to gather as many different structures as we possibly can, okay? Each of those structures are going to be given a rating of fair, poor, good condition, failing, and the database will be refined from there. So we'll be looking at failing and poor structures. And then the goal is to try to break the database down as far as we can so that we come up with structures that are considered most critical to the state of Wyoming in magnitude, mostly for, you know, potential funding and the potential for the damage that they could cause. Okay. Does that make sense? Is that a decent
Yes,
background?
it is. Yeah, that was.
Thank you, Mr.
That
Chair.
was good information.
Okay, so where we are today, we've completed the 10 state meetings. Had what we consider to be pretty good attendance at each one of the meetings. The consultant is currently working on the database that I described, and they're trying to finish that up right now. They're up to 4,000 structures right now. And those structures include good and excellent condition structures, as well as the fair and failing, or poor and failing, I apologize. And they're expecting to have about 10,000 structures that they're going to have to work with in the end. Part of the process of gathering data, looking through our projects that we have done, is to contact entities. There are 157 entities in our irrigation system survey, and the consultant has reached out to every one of those, including conservation districts, NRCS personnel, and hydrographer commissioners. They've reached out to all of them to get further information. And one of the questions that they asked was, what are the things that keep you up at night? So that we could have help determining what structures are critical to each district. each entity. The consultant has been on 18 site visits to actually look at structures, and each one of them, there were multiple structures looked at the time. Casper, Alcova, Midvale, and Goshen are just 3 of those to name a few. Most recently, we completed our criticality workshop. The attendees were Water Development staff, Barry Lawrence, Bill Brewer, Jason Mead, and myself, the entire team of consultants. And what we did is we sat down and we defined variables that will help sort the database structure. And it's done in 2 phases, with phase 1 being the first cut will be all structures that are in poor or failing condition. Then we're going to look at what type of structure it is, like a diversion, a pump station, a head gate, a siphon. In other words, items that if they're lost, then irrigation stops completely to the entity. And then we're going to look at acres served. And then kind of in a second phase that's more informative is to look at things like collateral damage, permitting, funding potential, things like that. And that can't be applied to all the structures, but the ones that shake out to be the most critical are the ones that are going to be taken a little bit further with the more informative variables. And that's where we are today with critical aging infrastructure.
Committee, are there any questions? Now, I think, you-
Representative Eklund, I have a question.
go ahead, Mr. Speaker.
Representative, thank you, or Chairman, thank you. I guess my question is, as this is rolled out, obviously around the state, do structures just include, can they just include the canal, or is it a structure within a canal, like a tunnel, like a head gate, siphons, that sort of thing? So what is so can the structure be the canal itself? That's the question I have.
There are, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
excuse me.
Go ahead.
There are areas identified, canal embankments where there's potential issues. We're really looking at perched canals. So yes, that can be considered a structure, a canal can, and that's going to have to be something identified by an entity or the consultant on site.
Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Tavelli, I think when you're ready, we'll proceed on to the Laprelle Irrigation District Rehab.
Okay, Mr. Chair, this is the Laprelle Dam update. This summer, they completed a very successful drilling program in spite of some unique challenges. For those of you who've been on site, you know that left abutment is on cliffs. And so in order to drill to get data down below the surface, we had to have a helicopter come in and fly the drilling rig up on top of the cliff where they drilled. And it was very successful. Currently, they're over $100,000 under budget on that. The only thing left to do is some site reclamation, which will be done this spring. So it looks like we're going to come in significantly under budget. They're currently working on a concrete mix design. There were 2 areas on site that were drilled to look for aggregate potential, and neither of those have panned out so far. So they're looking at 2 more local commercial sites. The mix design is important to help inform their modeling, as well as future reinforced roller compacted concrete strength properties. A physical model is being built right now in a lab in Seattle, Washington. It's a mock-up of the dam itself, and they're going to run floods over the top of it to look at stresses on the dam structure, as well as evaluate the spillway design. The spillway is pretty interesting, the way the dam is sitting and the way the stream kind of changes direction downstream, where they're trying to not have the spillway dump the water up on the cliff, eroding the cliff. They're trying to get it to land more in the channel. So the structural model will determine that. There has been some permitting discussion. We met with the United States Bureau of Reclamation in February, and it was determined that they're going to be a lead agency. They stated that we will need to coordinate as a cooperating agency with the USACE, and they are expecting an environmental assessment process. They said that they believe a CADX is not feasible, that an EA is the most likely. Currently, they're working on draft letters back and forth. We did receive a letter from the Bureau of Rec stating these claims of the need for an EA. So stepping forward away from the project a little bit is the financial agreement that we're working on with the Bureau of Reclamation. So a little history in the infrastructure bill, also called the bipartisan infrastructure law. There was $100 million allocated to a CARES Act dam that met certain other criterion. The governor of the state of Wyoming was supposed to respond to the Bureau of Reclamation and state the claims that matched the criterion within the infrastructure law and request the funding. The Bureau of Reclamation sent a letter back to the governor saying, we agree, Laprelle Dam meets the criterion and we have this money available. Laprelle can apply for it. So in the meantime, they requested information from our office. We went back and forth, and it culminated in us submitting an application last month or a month before that, 4 to 6 weeks ago, to the Bureau of Reclamation requesting $5 million, which was set aside in the Bureau of Reclamation's fiscal year 2023 plan. We just received last week, we received a draft financial agreement for that funding. It looks like we're going to be selected, and right now we're reviewing that document. But everything looks like it's in place. We did also make, in the meantime, a request for the remaining $95 million. We don't want to take a chance of that getting used somewhere else by a change in the legislation. So we made that request, and it's unknown how that's going to turn out. We'll have to see how fiscal year 24 is defined. And that's where we sit with that. Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
Chase, a couple of questions. What was the initial $5 million for BOR of the built funds for?
It's gonna be for design work, design and planning is how I believe it was stated in the fiscal year 23 report. And it's gonna work out that way with what we're working on as well.
So, Mr. Chairman, a follow-up, Chase, is I thought we'd already contracted phase 3 level 2 study for engineering designs on this. This is why we're looking at a roller compacting concrete. So again, is BOR going to redesign this project after we've gone through these current level with water development? What's the rationale on the design side?
Mr. Chair, thanks for that question, Senator Hicks. The consultant is just beyond 10% design at this point. This funding, this $5 million should get us all the way through the entire 30, 60, and 90% design and get us through bidding and procurement. So there's still some planning to be done. There's the physical model that's being worked on. And we anticipate that once we're signed these financial agreements that we'll be able to switch over to the $5 million from the feds, but there's still a lot of design left to be done.
Okay, just to follow up there, I think for clarification, Chase. So the $5 million is design. BOR is not going to design this project. We would just use those $5 million from the BOR to continue to move to 30, 60, and 90% with the existing contractor. Is that how I understand it?
Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you. That clarifies it. And Mr. Chairman, one other question on the design of the stream down the stream of that. I'm curious, is they looking at downstream potential modifications, or actually, you know, typically a roller compacted concrete dam, the dam's a spillway. Just a little more input on that, Chase, as to what they're actually looking at to try to guide that foul wag of those releases over the spills over the dam.
Mr. Chairman, there's gonna be no redesign of the thaw wag of the stream, to my understanding at this point. The spillway is a flip bucket design, so water's gonna spill over the top and it's gonna be shot out away from the dam's foundation for protecting the dam. And we're trying to find out, well, what the consultant is trying to find out is if this water is gonna be smashing up against the cliff. If it is, there's gonna have to be some work done there to remove excess material that could come off. Or are we gonna be able to get that plunge pool down in the channel?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm guessing part of the committee is a little confused with it, and maybe I am too. We started this project several years ago because the cliffs were looking like they were gonna, rocks on the cliffs looked like they were gonna fall on the structure itself. Upon close examination, they discovered some real issues with the dam itself. And as we proceeded through the project, we'll probably be moving the reservoir, am I correct on that, down about a quarter of a mile or so?
Dam.
Thinking that?
Mr. Chair, yes, this will be a new dam moved downstream a couple 100 feet, I believe.
So that's the reason for the environmental assessment and for maybe years of planning before we get it done. Also, we haven't been able to cloud seed that area because this structure can't really stand. They're only filling it, what, half full or so?
Roughly,
Partially
yes, sir.
full. So the irrigators aren't able to use it very well yet. So that's what we've got going on with Laprelle.
Chairman Eklund?
Yes, go ahead, Representative Conrad.
Thank you, sir. Just a quick question. I may be off base here, but are there scheduled from a project perspective or timeline, a critical path? Most importantly, what are the timelines? Are there such associated with these projects, and how are we doing on that timeline?
Mr. Chair, right now we are on time. I can't quote you exact dates. Part of the application that we had to turn into the Bureau of Reclamation included tasks, rough scope of work and timelines. And my consultant has informed me that we are moving on the critical path. There's been no major delays. So everything is working as good as it can right now so far.
Chairman Eklund, follow up?
Yep, go ahead, follow up.
Just a question, Mr. Tavelli, does that include the critical aging irrigation infrastructure and also the third project we're speaking about? So all three are on schedule?
Mr. Chair, I've referred to two projects so far today. One is a critical aging irrigation infrastructure project, and that is on time. We will have a final report at the end of December. The Laprelle project is a separate project, and yes, it's on time.
Thank you. Look
Mr.
forward to hearing
Chairman?
about the third.
Yeah, somebody else had a question.
Yeah, Mr. Vice
Go ahead,
Chair.
Senator Hicks.
Chase, with the 10% design work, do we have with the latest any estimates on estimated construction costs at this point in time with inflationary numbers on this project?
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding we're looking at a 2026 start date. And yes, we do have a cost estimate that is up through the midway of construction, and that is for a little over $118 million.
All right, thank you.
Do we have a finishing date? So that we know whether that is going to take in enough time for the inflated numbers that may come along, or?
Mr. Chair, I have asked my consultant numerous times if they're confident with this $118 million proposal, and they have indicated to me that they feel that they're pretty confident it's going to be around there,
Okay,
potentially less.
good.
So, Mr. Vice Chair, one other follow-up, Chase, with that 2026 potential construction start date. what is the lag time that we're looking at right now? Because if the BOR is saying this is an EA level decision versus an EIS, I would think that that can be completed in 12 months under an EA. What other time constraints are we looking at?
Mr. Chairman, I'd say the other time constraint is just completing design itself. It's probably going to take a year to 18 months. And they don't want to get too far down the design path before they get the NEPA completed. Because if there's anything that comes out of NEPA, you'd have to backtrack on the design potentially for mitigation measures or what have you. So it's really just a relic of the NEPA timeframe and then the design timeframe. And as the NEPA moves forward and we get more comfortable with how it could play out, then of course we would start design as soon as possible.
Yeah, and Jason, my question is on that would be normal under a full-blown EIS. Under an EA level decision, I mean, this is a much smaller document, and I guess I'd ask to go back and maybe have some discussions with the consultant, the BOR on that. Seems to me like at a 10% design would be sufficient to do the environmental assessment. This is not an impact statement. It doesn't require the level of analysis and alternative consideration that you would with a normal EIS. So just going forward, it may be a discussion because it seems to me like those processes may be able to move more concurrently under an EA. And move this construction date up a year or so. But anyway, just if you guys would have that conversation, I think it'd be helpful, and then provide us an update of that discussion with the consultant and BOR at the next meeting. I just like to see this not held up because of an EA level decision when this is not a full-blown EIS.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I would add that we've had conversations with both the Corps of Engineers and Bureau of Reclamation and plan to have them in the same room here in the next, hopefully, month. I think I can't remember when we have the scheduled meeting, so they can have discussion back and forth on what each agency is going to need in the NEPA process. But assuming that gets started, fairly quickly, once we get through that, you could pretty much anticipate it's going to take the rest of 2023 anyway, even on an EA. At a minimum, we're talking 6 months and maybe closer to a year. And then, that puts you into 2024, the design taking anywhere from a year to 18 months. Hopefully we can get that started sooner if we have a good path forward on the EA, but that's going to take you through 2024 and into 2025. And then depending on when you want to start construction. So yeah, we'll keep on pushing on it as hard as we can though.
Thank you.
This is Representative Summers, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I have a question on the NEPA. Anymore, if you want to get anything done, you almost got to contract the NEPA. I don't know whether this is being contracted as part of this process or whether it's not, but if you leave it to the Bureau of Rec, it'll be forever. If you're contracting it, then it'll happen a lot quicker. So curiosity, who's doing the NEPA?
Mr. Chairman, HDR, RESPEC and HDR is our existing consultant, and typically on an EA we can use the consultant we already have under contract. So that's the plan right now. Under an EIS, you'd have to go out to a third-party contract, but either way, you wouldn't be using the federal agency for the reasons you mentioned.
Okay, any further questions, committee? I guess I would add, looks to me like you're pushing this along pretty quickly. I'm surprised that it's as far along as it is. I was thinking 15-20 year deal, but maybe not. I think it's going to happen quicker than that, which is really good for the irrigators of that region. Okay, moving on to the next.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Just an observation, it always helps to have an interstate highway below a failing dam if you want to expedite these projects.
Yeah. Yep, it does. All right, our next item for consideration here is consultant selection process. Now, wait a minute, are we gonna have to vote on this? We're not gonna have to, are we? Okay, all right.
Chairman Eklund,
Yes,
I was just going to let you know that Senator Ellis and Senator Guru have joined us, so we now have a quorum.
oh, thank you, senators. You were needed badly. Glad to have you here. Welcome to the meeting. Okay,
Sorry to be late, Mr. Chairman. I was just having a little trouble getting hooked in, but we're on now.
all right,
Mr. Chairman, ditto.
all right. Well, thank you. Now we can vote and go as planned. Mr. Lawrence, I believe when you're ready, take off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of Select Water. I'm pleased to be here today to talk to you a little bit about the consultant selection process for 2 projects. They're on a separate timeline, special process, and we'll talk about that. The 2 projects are the Green River, Little Snake River Basins Conveyance Loss Level 1 study and the Rollins Water Master Plan Level 1 study. And to refresh your memory, these 2 projects were amended in by Select Water at the December 7th meeting. And so as such, I should mention the conveyance loss study was amended in at $500,000 and the Rollins Water Master Plan was amended in at $250,000. And as such, we have not done consultant selection on these projects since they came in amended into the bill. I do have both our project managers here going to say a couple words about the projects, and then I'll run you through where we are in consultant selection because we're fast tracking on that as well. Our project manager on the conveyance loss study is Jay Smith, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about that project.
Mr. Chair. So for the Green River and Little Snake Basin conveyance loss study, the real meat of the scope, it essentially identifies sites that represent a larger geographic region and then develop methods for measuring loss and use and consumptive use, and then characterize return flows. And then with that information, the consultant will develop a tool that can be easily and efficiently used to quantify that data. It's a really simple explanation for something very, very complicated.
Committee questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Question, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
George, on that. Obviously, with these conveyance loss studies, there's going to have to be some geologic mapping of the canals and characterizations, because going forward, we're going to have to look at that. What part of, is that incorporated into the study?
Mr. Chair. Yes, it is. It will be a part of the return flow characterization, where they take a look at some of those geologic sites, the underlying soils, and they try to extrapolate that, right? And come up with some kind of tool that can be used by someone other than themselves.
Yeah, just to follow up, Ed, I don't know why that would be. I think it's pre-decisional to judge that that's going to be part of the return flow component. You could very well lose that as far as deep percolation, and particularly, I think in some places like maybe in the Upper Green and Sublette County. I don't want to prejudge the decision that this is a cause of return flows. But I think it's critical that we have the ability to look at those soil types and that geology to understand the nature of conveyance loss across the basin. But just want to make sure that's incorporated.
Mr. Chair, George Mosier with the Water Development Office. One of the things in answer, at least to Senator Hicks' question, one of the things that we tried to move into the request for proposal on this is the idea that we are expecting the consultant to have several different pilot sites and measurement sites in order to get that idea of how much the underlying geologic material might be providing as far as a mechanism for the conveyance loss. So one of the things that we talked about quite a bit was at a first stage overlying the geologic mapping, near surface bedrock geologic mapping, and alluvial material mapping with those various canals and ditches. That way we can get at what might the component of the underlying geologic material be contributing as far as losses in that particular canal.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I guess my question, obviously this will occur in my district to a great degree. And I'm wondering how you're going to, I guess, bring in bring in kind of the irrigators or bring in the conservation district into trying to help whoever gets the contract to take a look at, what type of ditches would you need to look at? It kind of goes to the point of what Senator Hicks was getting at, is what is the geology? But I think some of the on-ground knowledge will tell you, I think irrigators can tell you the difference between one side of the valley and the other, and where you get representative ditches to look at or canals to look at for this loss study. So I'm curious how you'll bring in local knowledge into this process.
Mr. Chair, to Representative Summers' question, part of the task number 3 is site determination, and that will be done in cooperation with the SEO, but also the landowners, the districts, because again, for most of these sites, we will need permission for access on these canals. So that will be a large part of what we do in that task, is to try to figure out where is it likely that we will get access? Where do we have some of that local knowledge that can really help? And maybe, because like you said, as fun as we all think geology is, there's other things that are probably pretty good drivers also.
Mr. Chairman, I would just add to the timeline for this. If we can get a consultant under board here fairly quickly, we would try to work through a lot of that stuff this year with the intent to actually complete measurements and acquire a lot of that information in the 2024 season. So we'll have this year to or this late summer into fall to get that nailed down on where exactly we want to go with the measurements.
Okay, committee, any further questions? All
Mr.
right.
Chair, if I might, now the second project is the Rollins Water Master Plan. I don't know if George Moser is our project manager, if you want to say a couple words about it.
Sure, Mr. Chair. The Rollins Water Master Plan was also a project that was amended in by Select Water prior to this year, and we are proceeding forward. Have a request for proposal out on the street. We've shortlisted to consulting firms that will be submitting written proposals on that, and I believe we're looking at the 21st for accepting written proposals. So.
Any questions? Okay.
And just to follow up, Mr. Chair, one last thing, as George has mentioned, RFPs have gone out on these projects. We went through a shortlisting process. RFPs went out to 4 firms on each project, and we're expecting those proposals next Monday. And then, and I will mention that our project managers did due diligence. They actually had pre-proposal meetings with all the consultants and so forth. So we'll have those proposals next Monday. Those will get bundled up, sent out to our selection teams. They'll have about 3 weeks to come up with rankings of the proposals. And then interviews will be held in our office Friday, April 21st, such that we're all bringing this home, such that at your May Commission Select Water joint meeting, we will have a consultant selected and then be asking for approval for a contract.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on. Planning projects amendment A. Director Mead.
Yep.
You want to
Mr.
take?
Chairman, if you're following along in your e-notebook that we provided, we now be on tab A. If you're looking on that left-hand side, there's typically a bookmarks icon that you can click on and it'll show the different tabs in the e-notebook, but I'll start walking through that. So this is the amendment number 2 to the Alkali Creek Reservoir final design. And this was a project that we brought to the commission and the Select Water Committee back in this at the November meeting, explaining that the project's been prolonged somewhat. We've had issues with landowners changes over the years of the NEPA and now the design work, some of the preliminary design work, where the easements and land acquisition has become a little more cumbersome because we have new landowners moving into the valley. And so that's drawn out that particular process, and then needed potential modifications to the supply canal to get water into the reservoir and alleviating some of the concerns with the new landowners and possibly needing to go to a pipe instead of modifications to the ditch. And then in addition to that, some of the previous geotechnical work showed a fairly weak foundation, so it changed the design or the type of dam. And with that, we've got different borrow areas and some additional geotechnical investigation needs to be done. So with that, in this amendment, we are asking for an extension of time to December 31st of 2024 to the contract, and then an additional $494,000. And this was also part of the omnibus planning bill that was considered back at the December meeting for the Select Water Committee, and then obviously throughout the legislative process. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'd ask for your favorable recommendation. And it's for some of the new members, and maybe Chairman could explain this more if I don't do well, but I think the role of the Select Water Committee to projects that the Water Development Commissions bring forward, specifically the projects that are, or contracts or agreements that are $5,000 or more, the Select Water Committee's role would be to review and recommend those projects either favorably or unfavorably to the Water Development Commission.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman, too.
All right, we've got several of you. We'll start with Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I am new to this process, but I did review the information. And it looked like there's been lots of, I don't know, maybe it's extensions, or it seems like there's been lots of money thrown into the planning part of this process. So can you give me a little history, and are we just continuing to escalate the price, or is there an end game on this thing?
Yeah, let me respond a little bit first to some of the history. Alkali Creek is above Warland. It's a supplementary water source to the irrigators in that region. And as we got into it, we had underestimated what it's basically a new reservoir, supplementary dam. And as we got into it, we found the geology was such that it was going to cost more than we expected it to cost. So that's part of what Representative Summers is probably talking about. We do have an end game, and that this will be completed. I'm not sure what the date will be, but it has been an involved process that will be greatly beneficial to the people above in that irrigation area. So I throw that in, and if the director has anything to add on.
The only other thing I'd add, Mr. Chairman, would be we have an appropriation. So this was a reservoir of about 9,000 acre feet now as it sits. The NEPA has been completed EIS several years ago. We've got all the permits in place through the Bureau of Land Management, as well as Corps of Engineers and Wyoming DEQ. So ready to move forward. The design work's been being completed, again with some of the caveats that I mentioned in regards to the amendment that we're requesting. The appropriation right now is $59 million for this project. We know that's not going to be enough. One, related to some of the geotechnical complexities that we've uncovered and the design changes associated with that, but then also again with everything we've been hearing about any construction project we're talking about with the inflation of cost of materials and everything else. So fully anticipating needing to come back next year for additional funding for construction. Right now, at least during the session, we were having some of those discussions, and I don't have a firm number right now, but I'm guessing it'll be an additional 25 million or thereabouts to get to the final opinion of construction cost from the consulting engineer.
Representative Summers, does that help you? Okay, thank you. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, Jason, I noticed when we had the original budget, we had $110,000 in there for other tasks. Have we used any of that money for this, the work that you're asking for now? Or was that 110 still there?
Mr. Chairman, that's a portion of what they considered they would need to complete the additional work. So that was part of the 494,000. Originally, we used about 55,000 of that to go through and work with the sponsor to apply for some of the new BIL funds under the small surface and groundwater storage, or small groundwater and surface, however that's said, program. And so some of that's been spent doing that, but that discretionary task was also considered as part of what would be available to get through the work to get to the point where we could bid it out and construct it.
All right, thank you.
I think there was another question I didn't
Yep.
catch.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, Senator Guru here.
Oh, Senator, go ahead.
Thank you. It kind of through you, Mr. Chairman, Jason, kind of tag on to the speaker's question. It really helped me when we move to delay these projects. I'd like to see, how many times have we delayed them before and what are the reasons why? Because it does, in my 2 years here, it does seem like I hear, we delay a project, say, well, we haven't got the easements quite right, or we don't have all the, the level 2 or 3 studies are finished yet. So just a little, blurb on that each time we go through those, just so we can take a look, because some of them seem to be delayed quite often. And I just kind of trying to get a handle on that myself.
Mr. Chairman noted, and we'll try to provide that as much as we can as we move forward.
Thank you.
Senator Larson here.
Yeah, Senator Larson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there maybe other people are getting calls from landowners that are new, obviously on easements, and I guess that's probably a big topic. Is there discussion about trying to pipe through their areas, or what are we considering? And I wouldn't mind if you visit with these people. I wouldn't mind being a part of that.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Larson, some of those discussions have been piping or really thinking through how can we alleviate some of the concerns of these new landowners, and that has led to some alternatives to pipe. That also comes back to the Paint Rock Creek is on the 319 or the 303D list for impaired waters, so that piping that would potentially help with that. So we're looking at a number of different options, and of course, piping increases the cost of construction because they're fairly large pipe, and 3 to 4 miles of that fairly large pipe instead of just enlarging a ditch. And so looking at funding sources that could then alleviate some of the funds that would be needed from state coffers to take care of those increases in costs by switching to pipe are also being looked at either through, say, the Clean Water SRF program or other federal programs. And sometimes, so we're working through that and trying to figure out what's going to be the best option moving forward. There's been quite a bit of discussion, and some landowners just are having a hard time, I think, understanding the benefits of the project to themselves and see maybe more of the impacts to their particular operation. And we're doing the best we can to help them understand we're here to try to improve their operation, or at least not harm it whatsoever. And we're committed to working with them as much as we can. So it's just been a challenge. There have been some other legislators involved at this point as well. And I don't know if that's made a big difference, but we'll sure let you know if we have additional discussions.
That'd be great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a general question. Obviously, I'm new, and I probably can only claim this statement a couple times before I'm not new. Just a question about the cost of this thing. I mean, do we just hang on to this and it is multiples more than it was first estimated? Is there any point that we stop when we don't do projects like this? I guess I just don't know the value of this thing, especially when it's escalated so much. And so obviously it's hard for me to make any decision about a change order without understanding. I know I don't know the background as well as most folks here probably do, but this is a lot more than it started. So I guess just in a nutshell, is this thing worth the money? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would respond a little bit to that, Senator. So when we started this project, we realized this was an area where they can grow just about any crops grown in Wyoming. They were growing these crops always short on water toward the end of the summer. Whatever it was, sugar beets or corn or whatever it was they were growing, they usually had reduced yields because of these water shortages. The irrigators in that district had worked together really well and done better sharing than probably most irrigation districts do. But they had not made calls on the river or the other reservoir storage systems that they had, and it seemed appropriate, since we could, to go ahead and start a planning project to expand the amount of irrigation water they had, because these are fairly high value crops. So in reference to that, I do think it's worth it, just in the value of the type of crops they're trying to raise in those areas. The other thing that goes into it, as you go into any of these projects, depending on the amount of permitting and other things you have to do, it's going to probably cost more than you expected. We had no idea what the inflationary problems would be. And until you get into the actual nuts and bolts of it, I don't think you know what the real geology is. Because this reservoir is, I don't know, it's like half a mile away from the main reservoir, I would guess.
Mr. Chairman,
Somewhere
that's a
in there.
brand new reservoir.
I know, but the existing one that's there, well, anyway, the geology is entirely different on this one than it was on that one, is what I recall. So we did get into more. I think at this point, you just really can't pull the plug. We've committed ourselves and spent quite a bit of money. I don't know what we've got tied up in it, but it's good many millions of dollars. So that's kind of how we do it, I think, and we'll probably continue to do in other reservoir projects that are around the state.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add, Senator Polk's question too. We recently updated the economics associated with some of the applications to federal programs. And with the direct irrigation benefits and indirect benefits, recreation, and a small portion of the construction benefits, we're estimating that the value of the project over its lifespan would be around $140 million. So that's significantly probably closer to a 1.5 to 1 benefit cost ratio. And as you probably know, anything over a benefit cost ratio of 1.0 shows a value where the benefits over life of the project is obviously outweighs the cost. So I think this is still a great project to move forward with, and provides drought resiliency to that district as well as that community, because most communities in Wyoming are ag based, and without the ag being there, the communities essentially go away eventually too, or suffer. So I do think it's a worthwhile project to continue forward with.
Any other discussion, committee?
Chairman Eklund?
Yes, go ahead, Representative Conrad.
Thank you, sir. Just a quick question, and I do not mean to make more work for Mr. Mead, but is it possible to get these projects on some sort of a spreadsheet that denotes the project, the short title, cost allocated, cost spent, and just as importantly, as we talked about earlier, which I think dovetails into what Senator Guerrier talked about, the estimated completion date, so we can have a better, I guess, visual of what these projects are, timing, cost, et cetera, would help me greatly.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, are you specifically talking about dam and reservoir projects?
Yes, sir.
We do have something online right now under the dam and reservoir link on our webpage. It's as updated as it can be right now. There's, I think 2 or 3, maybe 4 projects that the cost estimates have been updated in the fairly recent past. The majority of the other ones are slightly outdated. Will just come along as the planning continues forward. And that document provides an explanation in the note at the bottom of the kind of spreadsheet that says, here's what happens in a level 1 or level 2 phase 1, level 2 phase 2, kind of the process you go through to get to the construction of a reservoir. And then in the table itself for each project, it states where in that process that particular project is. It's a little bit difficult to pinpoint a certain year or date, especially in the planning level of analysis, when that project could be constructed. So I might point towards that, and I can sure provide that link to the Select Water Committee. And if that's not enough information, you can let me know and I can provide you additional information.
Greatly helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Senator Hicks.
Yeah, it might be helpful, Jason, if you guys could send your annual water update that you supply to the entire legislators and just send that out to, because it's an annual report water development does. And just make sure that everybody on Select Water Committee gets a copy of that. I think you'll find most of the information you need in that report. It's pretty extensive. So if Jason, you could just follow up with that, it would be helpful.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, we will follow up that, but in the future, if you see an email come across called the Water Development Commission Legislative Report, that's what Senator Hicks is referring to. And a copy of that went out to the entire legislature at the beginning of the session, or should have, through, I believe, LSA. But we'll sure resend that to the Select Water Committee members.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I guess something I would add, I started on this committee about 12 years ago, and we were just beginning the expansion of the Big Sandy Dam, and we're just now completing it or getting there, is what I understand.
Mr. Chairman, it should be complete this summer sometime.
All right, so it just takes a while. The important thing is we have people that have trained to do this and are committed to doing it. And we as a legislature have supported that. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Go
This
ahead.
is Senator Larson. I will make a motion that we accept the proposed amendment.
Been moved by Senator Larson that we accept the amendment. Seconded?
Second.
Seconded by Senator Guru. Okay. Somebody okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, we have raised hands. Yep. That motion passes. We'll move on to the next subject.
You bring us that summary spreadsheet for the plan.
Okay. So we're going to be working on 2023 level 1 and 2 planning project contracts. Mr. Mead, when you're ready, you can start in. And what we'll do, committee, I think, is we'll work on each one and then vote on them as a block, individually, in case any get pulled out or anything's questionable. But we'll just do each one as a block. So we'll do level 1 projects first. Mr. Mead, when you're ready, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, we should be able to see our screen now as a summary table. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
So instead of walking through each individual contract, because they're very repetitive when it gets to the boilerplate language, we'll attempt to go through them with this summary table. And again, these are projects, all these planning projects came through the water development process last year. I realized we have some new Select Water Committee members, but applications for planning projects are due March 1. So we actually just received planning project applications for this next year here within the last couple of weeks. And at our May meeting, which coming up, we'll be discussing and have project sponsors available to answer questions and recommendations put together on funding those different planning projects at that May meeting. So the projects you're seeing on the screen right now have all gone through that process last March when we received applications, and last May with the Water Development Commission and the Select Water Committee. And then again at the November meeting, we actually discussed these again in the context of also having the construction projects at that point, because on September 1 is the application deadline for construction project applications. So they've been vetted pretty heavily. And again, once they went through the commission and the Select Water Committee reviews, and of course they were put into the omnibus water bill planning and went through both committees of Agricultural Committee and Appropriations Committee, and of course all the discussion on the floor. So this is what has culminated from the omnibus water planning bill. If you want to follow along in the notebook and actually look at contracts, this is on tab B. The first block here in the summary table is for new development, account 1, and these are level 1 projects. As you'll see, there's 5 of them. They're all master plans. Master plan is really just a holistic look in this case, municipalities or, water improvement districts and things of that nature. Look at their system, understand what kind of condition it's in, understand if there's growth and what the future projected growth looks like and what we need to do to plan for that, or what that community needs to do to plan for that. And then more or less put together a roadmap of, what's the most critical or most important structures to their system, and a way to then for them to say, okay, well, now I understand what's in the worst condition, what's most critical. So I'll move forward with either additional level 2 feasibility studies for a particular component of that master plan, if it's complex enough to have multiple alternatives, and what's going to be the best investment for the state of Wyoming to actually go to construction on a particular project. Or sometimes people, they can jump from a level 1 master plan straight to construction sometimes. So these first ones, the Glendo, and what we're at,
Jason, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Go ahead, Senator.
But before you go on there, just because we do have a lot of members, so on this is a good chart to utilize it. You've got WDA 1, WDA 2, WDA 3. We all know those are water development accounts 1, 2, and 3. But could you just explain for the new member the 3 accounts and then the different phases? You've got level 1, level 2, level 3. So you've got 3 different accounts, and then you got 3 phases. But just for the new members, while you got this chart up there, could you go through that process so everybody's familiar with it?
Mr. Chairman, this is Barry Lawrence, Deputy Director for Planning. Sure. Happy to, and Senator Hicks, happy to answer that question and inform the new members. Level 1 projects typically would be reconnaissance level, 100,000 foot look at a system, as Jason's just mentioned, typically master plans, where you're looking at the whole system, kind of like he said, holistically, looking at recommendations for the future, looking at the structures, looking at the inventory, doing some mapping, coming up with recommendations, cost estimates, and a prioritized approach. These master plans typically, it's kind of like the Bible. These sponsors come to us and they like that look, and they work the projects that are laid in there with priorities and so forth. They look at those and they go back to that list and they go and work off that list for the next 10 years. Sometimes you'll see, and sometimes we get updates where they'll come back 10 years later asking for an update to a municipal master plan or an irrigation district master plan. So typically account level 1, and that'd be new development in this case, account 1 projects such as that. Also, then they can advance to a level 2. And a level 2 study would be like a feasibility where we drill down on a certain topic, and no pun intended there, but we're going to the 24,000 foot view, for instance, and we're looking at maybe a structure or something such as that, where we're doing a feasibility study on that structure. We're looking at cost estimates and designs, conceptual designs, and so forth. So it's going further into down the road of a certain structure and so forth. And then with the ultimate goal coming out of that with conceptual designs, cost estimates at level 2, that would then tee up for a level 3 construction project. And level 3 is construction. And so we'll do a level 1, level 2, level 3, and per statute, typically projects will advance from level 1, 2, and 3. And at level 2, as we're coming out of level 2, per statute, the commission is asked to make a determination on the merits of the project, whether to advance it or to determine further consideration of the project. And we do that through our closeout memos at meetings. And then they get into level 3, and that's teed up based on those cost estimates that we come up from the level 2 conceptual designs. And it is possible from time to time on a level 1, something is a critical nature, pertinence, or something that rather than spend another year going into level 2 design and conceptual design, it might be possible to flush out that extra little piece in a level 1 master plan, such that it can kind of fast track it to level 3. But we still follow the process for the statutes and do hearings and so forth on that. But anyway, that's level 1, 2, and 3.
And then I'd mentioned account 1 is just as the name implies, new development. So a lot of times that applies to municipal type projects. Account 2 is our rehabilitation. So those are for projects 15 years and older. That can apply to both municipal and agricultural projects, but it's mostly ag projects that you see that in. And then account 3, which I'll talk about. So if we start with a level 1, a lot of times it's a watershed study. And that's really looking at just the health and functionality of the watershed and all the different components of the watershed, sitting down with landowners who want to sit down and talk through potential small water type projects and get some of those kind of conceptually drawn up. And it also really just adds to getting the group of landowners and a community kind of starting to be organized. Because as you get into the NEPA process, being organized is pretty important to show a lot of support for a project. Then for our dams and reservoirs, again, account 3, level 2, we've got different phases. So we have level 2, phase 1, and that's really where we do a lot of hydrologic modeling to determine, do we have, most times we have sponsors coming to us because they have irrigation shortages. So that modeling more or less truths that and say, do we have shortages? We look at, I won't get into what models look at, but they're very in-depth. And from those models, we can determine, yes, there are irrigation shortages, or no, there isn't, and where there might be available water with a present day water rate to be able to store water. And then we start in that level 2, phase 1, we put together, assuming we have more or less purpose and need, we would put together, the consultants would put together the alternatives or a long list of reservoir alternatives, and then compare those side by side on how well they alleviate shortages and what all the different impacts associated with them would be, if you were to take them through NEPA process, and the technical feasibility, looking at geology and all the good things that you need to look at to determine if a reservoir site is good or not. So out of the phase 1, you would typically come out of that with a preferred alternative, which one looks to be the best, or maybe the top 2 or 3. And then in that level 2, phase 2 project, you actually go out and do field work. You don't want to do field work on 15 different alternatives because it's expensive. So that's why we wait until we start identifying a particular site. So then we would go out, we would do geotechnical drilling to get a better understanding, at least initially, of what the foundation of that dam looks like. Also, we would ground truth some of the wetlands from the National Wetland Inventory on the ground to make sure that, yes, it says 3 acres in the National Wetland Inventory. That's about 3 acres, or no, that's 25 acres, or what have you. Might also do some cultural work in the level 2, phase 2. And that just continually refines the information to make sure that we still think that's the best project moving forward. Then a level 2, phase 3 would be where we actually get into the permitting and design. And, you go through the NEPA process. Most large reservoirs, if it's not a reconstruction like Chase is talking about with LaPrelle, are going to be environmental impact statements. So you go through that. Again, hiring third-party NEPA contractors. It's got to be an independent, unbiased contractor for an EIS, with lead federal agencies being involved in kind of overseeing the work, with the state paying for it, or the state and the sponsors. And then, the design work is under level 2, phase 3. And then when you get to construction, that's level 3. So it might have been more than what you wanted, but you'll hear a lot about this over the next months and years, and it'll eventually sink in and become second nature for.
Yeah. So
This
so
is,
early on, the state will be paying for these master plans, trying to get those right. And then as we get into it further in construction projects, the sponsors start paying for a share of it.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay, we got 2 people speaking. Representative Sommers, were you one of them?
I was, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Go ahead, and then
My-
we'll get to the other one.
My question is, and I appreciate that information. It follows most construction that state does, really level 1, level 2. What I don't know on your level 1 projects or your level 2 projects, and I don't need a hard and fast number, but a percentage. So of these, let's say the level 1 projects, new development, how many actually applied, and then how many are we proceeding with? So what's that number look like? So obviously level 2 as well. Was there some level 2 projects that weren't that didn't meet muster, that are not coming forward? Just curious on that.
Mr. Chairman, Barry Lawrence, Water Development, and Representative Summers, let me tell you that we received 16 applications for planning studies. This is the 2022 projects that Director Mead referred to that came in last March 1. Of those 16, all 16 are in the planning bill. We didn't have any that withdrew or none that we determined that were ineligible. And so they're budgeted for. I will tell you that over the years, in the last 5 years, I'm only aware of one time where we had the city of Casper come in on a water treatment issue. And of course, we don't pay for water treatment study. But they were asked to ask us and we did turn it down. But for the most part, most of the planning studies go forward. And as Representative Eklund has mentioned, those are paid for 100% by the state, less a $1,000 application fee. And then also there's a small reimbursement fee that went into effect last year. And it's $1,000, $2,000, or $3,000, depending on the number of taps and water users and so forth, or the number of acres, irrigated acres.
Mr. Chairman, I'd add to what Barry said too. When we have sponsors or really anybody throughout the state that has a question or thinks they need a study, they'll typically call us and we help them understand the program and what can fit in our program, what can't fit in our program. So by the time they submit an application, they pretty well know that, yeah, they're probably going to be able to fit into our criteria, and the ones that don't or aren't good projects for the water development program have kind of been vetted out before they even submit an application, because we don't want to waste their time.
Okay. Representative Summers, does that answer your questions? All right. I think, was it Senator Guru? Did you have a question as well? Someone else piped up.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I believe, Jason, wasn't there a couple or Barry, wasn't there a couple applicants that felt like that the commission just delayed those applications given the level of funding in account one?
Mr. Chairman, there were a few that it was mostly construction projects that came in where we talked with, and they were municipal projects. We talked with the sponsors, and a lot of times those move along a little slower because of the easements you have to get, and there's more stuff in the way, more or less, and a lot more landowners to deal with on easements. And so what we suggested to those construction projects is that we phase them, and we've done this in the past where we provide funding for the design and pre-construction work, get easements in place and all that stuff. And then actually they'll come back for construction dollars in, say, next year's application. So there were a handful, three of those that we did that. And then there were a number of construction projects that asked for additional funding, but with the funding that we had available, we said, we're going to fund some of you if you had your approval from us that you were more or less shovel ready and ready to go to bid by September 1 of last year, then we funded it. But there were a number of them that had various things. They weren't quite ready to go to construction. So we wanted to incentivize them getting that stuff done. And so we put some money into the sponsor contingency funds for both account 1 and account 2 and said, when you're ready, come back for that funding. And then the commission and the select water committee will consider that. And if it makes sense, we'll move forward at that time. So
Okay,
that's
thank you, Jason. Mr. Vice Chair, if there's no more questions, I would move for approval of the 2023 level 1 and level 2 planning project contracts.
Okay, committee, any questions before? Looks like we're good. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. I'm not. Senator, okay, been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the director's recommendation on these level 1 projects, new development, say aye, or raise your hand. That'd be the easiest way of doing it. Don't know as there you are, Avi. And Senator Guru, I don't know how to, you can say, just say, there you are. Now we got everybody's picture there. That motion passes. Okay, we're ready for the next block of projects, level 2 projects, new development. That'd be in tab C. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I believe they just voted on the entire block of level 1 and 2 planning contracts.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're on the item number 5 at the bottom.
Okay. All right. I guess we're good then. We're ready for the small water project program funding applications. Jody, when you're ready, that'd be tab F.
Mr. Chairman, real quick before Jody gets started, we're going to share another document on the screen. We've got something that's been slightly updated from the document that was in the e-notebook, and it's just, I believe, the summary table from different applications.
The one that's in the e-notebook that I
Bear
updated
with
on
us for
Friday.
just a second while we get that pulled up and shared.
Okay. Hang
It
on,
was under
committee.
Small water. And then reviewed regs. And then there'll be those two right there.
Jody, whatever order you want to talk to stuff.
Okay.
You might
This-
want to.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr.
Representative
Chairman, my apologies. I'm always full of questions. So as we go into the small water project part of this discussion, one, just as the presenter presents, explain kind of the process and then how, this list of projects, has it already been chosen by another select committee, and then we're just finalizing this? That's one thing I'd want to know. And then the other is, and I'll just be honest, how are different sides of the state equalized in these projects? So I'm just curious if there's if it's just all applicants get funded, or if there's actually some rigor in how you decide who gets money when.
Mr. Speaker, I'll respond to a little of that, and that's the history of the small water projects. It's been a real popular program in the state of Wyoming by the Water Development Commission as well as Select Water. We're able to develop things without the full-blown EIS or ES or any of those NEPA evaluations, different things. They're usually not as expensive to put in, and we're able to get quite a bit of work done on the ground, and so it's been a popular program in that respect.
So,
And
Mr. Chairman, I totally agree. I mean, I've been a beneficiary of a small water project on a ditch. But my question is, this list already been decided and we're finalizing? And then is every project that's brought forward funded, or is there some way that the merits of the projects are ferreted out? I know they got to meet criteria. I get that. I've been through the process. But if you're a good grant writer, do you get every project that comes forth funded?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, we can have Jody Pavlica administer that program. Talk to that. Jody.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. That's a good question, and it's one that I spend a great deal of time addressing. If you've ever heard my Small Water 101 presentation, that, as most of you are well aware, that this program sort of hangs on the constitutional requirement that public benefit be provided as a result of each one of these projects. And so we take that responsibility very seriously here in the office. And applications are due from sponsoring entities on November 15th. And then we begin the process. When I say we, I say myself and Mabel Jones here in the office begin the process of going through each one of the applications to make sure, number one, that it meets the requirements of the criteria. But in addition to that, it has to also have enough public benefit to the project that it makes that constitutional requirement as well. So then those projects all get considered and prepared. You'll notice the 1, 2, 3, 4th column over talks about priority. Our criteria has a priority system in it as far as what type of project and what sort of numerical priority that project receives based on its project type. And then we will look at funding those projects based on their priority and the funding that's available. So I'll back up and run through the timeline for you. The applications will come in November 15th. And then in November-December timeline, we will prepare a recommendation for the Select Water Committee for anticipated funding request for the Small Water Project Program. And because of the popularity of this program, we have recently in the last 5 years set a number. We're going to ask for this and we're going to ask for, for account 1 and account for this and account 2 so that the program doesn't grow beyond the committee's intention. So that's typically $1 million in account 1 and 500,000 in account 2. And so we'll put those recommendations together in the fall as needed. And then we'll get the applications in November 15th, and then we'll compare how much money do we have left over in the small water accounts to roll over into the new funding, plus the new requests that we get. And can we fund everything, or is there not enough funding to go around? And that's only happened a couple of times. In the event that there was not enough funding to go around, the criteria states that we will cut it off at a whole category. So as an example, if we don't have enough money to fund all of the priority 4s, we won't fund any priority 4s. We'll just stop at the 3s. So that's how we would handle it should that need arise. But it doesn't come up too terribly often. We have been pretty fortunate that the sponsors do a good job of estimating the total project costs, and regularly there is money returned to the small water accounts that is not required because of in-kind services and other matching funds and grants. And so when money is returned because they don't spend it all on a project, that money then rolls over to allow us to use it on another project. So we have been pretty fortunate in that we have been able to fund everything typically in this case. I mean, not every case, obviously we've had to limit once or twice, but we're typically able to fund what comes in. This year we had 68 applications with one that withdrew. And I think that one, they probably took a look at the funding that just got a little bit more expensive, and then they withdrew the application from consideration. So did that address the question? Did I miss anything there?
Thank you. That helped. This list has, my question still is, has this list already been vetted by the select committee and we are just doing the final stamp on it? Or is this the first look at this list that a select committee is had? And then I do appreciate, so ultimately, if you're a good grant writer, you get funded. That's what I heard out of your explanation. So I can't remember the exact proposal in here, and the reason that, I'm a rancher and I get it, but I saw a well project on, I think it was less than 2,000 acres, a pasture of less than 2,000 acres. That's great. I mean, I'd love to have lots of water projects on my ranch, and they're all going to benefit wildlife. The question is it just because nobody knows that this program exists out there? Or why I just found it interesting that there was a well that's in this project that's permitted on 2,000 acres or less pasture. It was just a surprise to me. So I guess it's just simply whatever projects come in, you fund, as long as they meet the criteria and they're within the rankings. That's what I gather. But my other primary question, has this list been vetted by another select committee? Are we the only one that has vetted this list?
You guys, this is the first time anyone outside of this office has seen this list. It takes a great deal of time for us to get everything prepared and put together for review. So it has not been through another committee at this point. And the way we have customarily operated this, rather than consensus, there's so many of them, rather than consider each of these projects individually, we sort of look at them because of their small size. We sort of look at them in blocks according to sponsor, according to project type and that sort of thing.
Jody, if you could just real quickly explain the grant program at a high level and the fact that we only go up 50% up to 35,000. So it's a fairly small amount of money in the grand scheme of things. There's a lot of funding partners associated with these as well, maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So this project is a 50% grant up to $35,000. So you can come in for $1 million project if you decide to, but that only gets you a $35,000 grant. Demi, I'm having a phone issue here. But our grant tops out at $35,000. There are regularly additional funding partners with this program. We partner very well, whether it be with private funding partners like Ducks Unlimited and Trout Unlimited and those guys, or whether it be federal funding partners. We partner with a lot of different groups. Projects that are eligible, as we talked about a little bit, wells, we do a lot of solar platforms, pipes and conveyance, springs, wetlands, environmental projects, which specifically speaks to stream bank stability, water quality improvements, or erosion protection. Irrigation projects may be eligible depending on the public benefit associated. WIMA projects, which we don't typically do very many of. Rural community fire suppression and recreational projects, or projects that have been determined to.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, in a nutshell, yes, this is the first time that any committee has seen this list of projects. The application deadline was the end of November. Is that right, Jody?
And November 15th.
November 15th. And so we had a pretty good idea of the general number of applications going into the session. Now Jody's had a chance to look through all those applications, work with the different sponsors, understand the public benefit that they put forth, and either agreed or disagreed with those, and has put together this list for your guys' consideration.
Yeah.
And so Jody, if you want to maybe walk down through the list of that, and
But let me add something to maybe help Representative Summers on one of his questions. The well on a couple thousand acres. And office, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when they do the watershed studies, they'll oftentimes fit in beneficial water sources and what have you, and wells would be part of that study. And so that more than likely came into the watershed study. At that point in time, they saw benefits to putting another water source there, and it's a beneficial use because they water the wildlife as well as livestock or whatever else might be out there. But oftentimes it's done as that study is done, I believe, isn't it?
Mr. Chairman, a lot of these
inclusion.
small water projects come through watershed studies. That used to be a requirement for the program. That's no longer a requirement for the program,
Okay.
but we still have sponsors doing watershed studies.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, and Jason, one other thing that I would just add to that is it's not necessarily fair to look at it to the size of the amount of property that the landowner has, but you have to look at it on the watershed scale. So to say that this guy has a few thousand acres isn't necessarily giving you the full pictures, because by putting in that water source, you are going to repair the riparian habitat that the cattle would be damaging if they hadn't had that tank in the uplands. And so when that riparian habitat comes back, then you are reducing erosion on the stream channel, and you're slowing that water down so it doesn't just move through really fast in the spring, but it slows down. And we've heard anecdotal evidence of people who've come back years later and said, this used to be an ephemeral drainage, and now it's a year-round live stream, by virtue of the fact that the wetlands have come back, the willows have come back, and it's slowed the movement of the water through, so it stays longer and it's there more throughout the year. So we try to look at this from more of a holistic watershed perspective, and not necessarily an acres benefited, and that just sort of requires a sort of shift in your thought process for how we look at these projects, because it sort of benefits a much larger area rather than a area based on ownership.
Okay, Representative Summers, does that answer the questions that you had? Do you have any others, or committee, do you have any others?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. It does answer my question. Just the guy that was on appropriations for me, comes back in me, and I look at a series of projects that are going to have virtually no vetting by the legislature because we just adopt this. I'm not saying they're not all good projects. I just didn't know the process, and certainly it could have been within my purview because I did look at many of these to look harder and ask individual questions before the meeting, but that would have took some doing. So no, I like water. I like small water projects. I'm going to vote aye, but I just think that when I vet something, I try to vet it, and obviously I'm not doing a very good job so far.
Well,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, just to respond, the Water Development Commission will look over these projects before ahead of the select water, and then the select water will vote on it. And then it usually comes in an omnibus water bill. So yeah, Senator Hicks, I think you had something. Oh, we got,
Yeah, if I may, I can maybe help. So there's numerous steps of vetting through this process. And the first thing is it has to meet the criteria, and it's not unusual to have project applicant come in and then they go to a sponsor, which we've had a few for municipalities, but typically they're conservation districts, you see for the list. So many projects I shouldn't say many, but projects will get weeded out right there because most of these districts are familiar with the criteria. So a lot of times they never even make it in the form of an application. The next series in the process of vetting goes to the commission or goes to the staff, and Jody oversees the program. She reviews that, makes a recommendation back to her superiors, and they put a list together. This is a little bit unusual. Today, usually the Water Development Commission reviews all these projects, and they will have each one of these project sponsors will come either online or and the commission will then ask individual questions on these projects. And then normally it comes to Select Water Committee. We just, because of the process, got a little screwed up this year. We're seeing this before the commission. The commission will review these over the next couple of days. And then the normal process is as far as the appropriation goes. Historically, the legislature has appropriated a set amount of money for this program, typically around $1.5 million in the new development, and then $1 million in the rehab account, and then they're eligible. Then people apply for these fundings, and I want to talk a little bit about the application process. It's an application, and I would tell you these applications they don't take professional grant writers by any means. What you tend to see is through the applications, what it takes more than I would say than a grant writer, which I don't think it takes a grant writer at all. It takes the engineering and then the technical assistance to be able to put these together. And so a lot of times, you're relying upon federal agencies to provide some of the technical assistance. In some places where it's more difficult to work with Forest Service and BLM, you don't tend to see as many applications on federal lands as other places. And that's another area within the ranking process, in the vetting process. On these federal projects that come through, that has to go all the way through, their range staff, their wildlife staff, and then actually they'll come to a local conservation district and ask to sponsor those applications. So it's a long process to get one of these funded, but specifically the legislature usually just appropriates a block of money, 1.5 million historically in new development and $1 million in rehab. Then it goes to water development and then comes back to select water after those appropriations have come in met. So I hope that helps. Some of the information on the program is just some of the background on it.
Senator Larson, you have a hand up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I should know this probably. How do we verify completion? Is it pictures, or do we, does the office go and look at every project?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Larson, thank you so much for your question. I wish I had the time to go visit every one of these projects, but unfortunately, as a one-man band, it's a little hard to get out and see them all. So we do have several requirements to sort of vet these before we make a payment on the project. One, of course, is as constructed photos, and the other, and probably more importantly, are signed as-built drawings or a letter from a federal agency that says we've inspected the project and it's functioning in the manner that it's intended. And so that signed as-built, whether it be from the engineer or the federal agency or the letter from the federal agency, requires that they then have to inspect the project, go out and see the project, and then as a neutral third party, report back to us that the project is functioning in the manner that it was intended to function. So that's a very good question. Thank you for asking.
All right. Do you also receive receipts for supplies purchased and what have you? So that would be a verification as well.
Absolutely. And that's a good point. We scrutinize every receipt that comes in and weed through the coolers and chewing gum. And it's kind of a long process on some of these in-kind services, but we do only pay on as constructed receipts and invoices. And so that's another verification as well.
Mr. Chairman, this is Representative Summers again.
Go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, you'll get me broke to lead here pretty quick, but I got one more question. And that is, I think Senator Hicks brought up a good point, which would ease my mind a lot, is that if a commission, right, that's kind of overseeing the agency actually reviews these projects prior to what we see, and they actually go through each one and they vet them, that gives me a lot of comfort, right? That's not unlike many other programs we have in the state. I guess my question is, if that didn't happen this time, why didn't it happen? Because I kind of missed that, or I didn't hear it. And is that correct, that the commission would generally pull these apart and hear them at more greater detail than we would?
Mr. Chairman, I'll attempt to answer that. The role of the Select Water Committee when it comes to agreements and contracts is a bit of a conundrum, because the role is to review and recommend. And if the commission has already approved a contract or an agreement, then what's the point of the Select Water Committee coming in after the fact and reviewing and recommending? It's already been approved. So that was pointed out by our Representative Simpson, I think, in just the last year or so. But it's been fairly typical that the Select Water Committee sees these, I think, before the commission does at our March meeting. And have we always done these at the March meeting, or has it been in the joint meeting in the past?
We've always done it at the March meeting, but the Select Water Committee meeting seems to get scheduled kind of more fluidly than the
Yeah,
commission
just
meeting
because of
does.
the end of the session and all that. So we can think about that for future meetings and small water applications and see if we can't figure out how to do that better. But in your guys' role as review and recommendation, I think you're the first line in recommending to the commission that, yes, we like these projects, therefore commission, now you do with them what you feel like you should do with them.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think I may have misspoke when I said that historically water development sees these before Select Water, but I'm aware of at least once or twice in the last 10 years, but typically not. I misspoke.
Okay. Committee, any other questions? Okay, so we need, are we done, Jody, on the,
I think
On
the table, if
okay,
you're so inclined.
yeah,
Okay, so we'll begin with the account one table, and I'm not going to go through every project just for the sake of time, but I'll go through that last column on the right there. And if we look at the individual conservation district and the projects that they've applied for. So the Clear Creek Conservation District has applied for one project for a total grant request of $35,000. The Hot Springs Conservation District has applied for 5 projects for a total grant request of $175,000. Laramie County Conservation District has applied for 8 projects for a total grant request of $248,000. Laramie Rivers Conservation District, and I guess I should slow down. This is account one. We'll go through account 2 projects here after this. So the Laramie Rivers Conservation District has one account 1 project for a total of $35,000. Little Snake River Conservation District has applied for 19 account 1 projects for a total of $633,900. The Medicine Bow Conservation District has applied for 5 account 1 projects for a grant request of $170,000. The Poposia Conservation District has applied for 2 account 1 projects for a total of $66,000. Sheridan County Conservation District has applied for 3 projects for a account 1 grant request of $105,000. The Shoshone Conservation District has applied for 2 account 1 projects for a grant request of $63,250. The South Bighorn Conservation District has applied for 1 account 1 project for a total of $35,000. And the Sublette County Conservation District has applied for 2 account 1 projects for a grant of $70,000. And one of those did receive a shovel-ready designation. So that is account 1 totals, the new 2023 request totals $1,636,150, which leaves us, and this is in the table below there, which leaves us a remaining balance in the small water account 1 of $136,143.45. And I can move on to account 2, or I can answer any questions if there are any.
Are there questions on account 1?
Jody might mention the map again.
No.
Okay,
There is additional information in your table as well. If you're interested, or excuse me, not in the table, but in the notebook, there is a statewide map of where all the projects are located and individual recommendations for each projects. For those of you that are kind of new here, that'll give you an idea on where the projects are located and more details if you're interested in specifics. Okay, we're ready to move on.
okay,
to
go ahead and move on to account 2.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. Here we are, account 2. So under account 2, the Laramie County Conservation District has 2 account 2 projects for a total of $43,000. The Laramie Rivers Conservation District has 1 account 2 project for a total of $35,000. The Little Snake River Conservation District has 7 account 2 projects for a total of $202,000. The Poposia Conservation District has 1 account 2 project for a total of $30,000. The Powell Clarks Fork Conservation District has 1 account 2 project for a total of $21,125. The Sheridan County Conservation District has 2 account 2 projects for a total of $65,000. The Shoshone Conservation District has 1 account 2 project for a total of $18,400. The South Bighorn Conservation District has 1 account 2 project for a total of $35,000. The Star Valley Conservation District has 1 account 2 project for a total of $35,000. And the Sublette County Conservation District has 1 account 2 project for a total of $10,250. So that leaves the total available in account 2 $1,161,127. The 2023 requests added up to $494,775, which leaves a remaining balance in account 2 of $666,352.
Committee, any questions?
David's going to switch to the map for us, get an idea of sort of what it looks like.
Okay,
Are there any questions?
any other questions? So I think we need a motion on this for approval. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion. Senator Larson.
Senator Larson,
Second.
seconded by Senator Guru. All those in favor, raise your hand. That motion passes. Well, I should say opposed. Passes. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay. Yeah, Senator Hicks.
yeah, I was trying to get your attention, but I had my speaker on mute. One of those projects in the rehab was on a project, and I'm a permittee in that grazing allotment, and I was gonna have that removed so I can vote on the bill, but I will just, for the record, say that I've abstained on voting on all of the small water project bills for this purposes.
Yeah, I think that would be a better way of getting your project funded.
Well, I was gonna have it with removed and not vote on it at all, but I just won't vote.
Oh, vote on it separately next time. Okay.
Yep.
I think it passes for now, and we can, if we have to do another vote on it later, we'll try to make that clarification. Okay. We're ready for Mr. Kerr, is he online? Greg, if you're around,
I am.
there you are. Welcome to our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Select Water Committee. My name is Greg Kerr. I am the Director of the Office of Water Programs at the University of Wyoming. Within the Office of Water Programs, we administer the Water Research Program. And from listening in on the meeting here, I understand some folks may be unfamiliar with various items on the agenda today. So I'd like to give you a brief overview of what the Water Research Program is and talk to you a little bit about our process for Water Research Program projects that are in the MOU item today. First of all, the Water Research Program is a three-way cooperative program. We cooperate through the state of Wyoming with the Wyoming Water Development Commission, through the federal government, through the USGS, and the University of Wyoming with various faculty researchers. This program has three main goals. First of all, through the university and funded projects, we address water-related research on water issues within the state and region. Secondly, we have a goal of training young scientists, in essence, students that throughout all of these projects, they gain experience and expertise, hopefully to go on and get jobs in Wyoming in the water resources fields. And then our third goal is to simply take that information that we receive from research projects and distribute that by information dissemination on various entities throughout the state and nationally. So those are our three goals. We go through a pretty significant process in order to select projects. And I pulled this up in order to let you know briefly what that is. In April of each year, and so coming up, we'll start a new process. But April, we do solicitation of research topics and draft an RFP that is developed by the Office Water Programs and the Water Research Program Advisory Committee. That advisory committee is made up of 8 various state and federal entities. Then in May, that RFP is sent to the Water Development Commission and the Select Water Committee for approval. So they review it and approve that each year in May. In August, we distribute the RFP on the UW campus to researchers in the water field. In October, we solicit then those various research proposals. Those are due in October. October and November, then we have research proposals that go through a peer review process that the Office of Water Programs facilitates. In November, we have research proposals that are then reviewed and ranked by our advisory committee. During a December meeting of the Water Development Commission and the Select Water, those rankings are reviewed by them and projects are then approved, selected and approved from that ranking list. In December, the Omnibus Water Planning Bill legislation is drafted with a recommendation for projects that were selected in December. So then January through March, the planning bill is acted on by the Wyoming State Legislature. In March, the Water Research Program MOU hopefully is approved by you folks. So that's where we are today with that process. So today we have 2 projects that went through this entire process, and those are presented to you for approval of the MOU. The first project, which is evaluating toxicity of harmful cyanobacterial blooms in Wyoming lakes and reservoirs. This addresses a hot topic actually in Wyoming and all over the country right now. We have, in the summers, seems to be an explosion, and most of you are probably aware of the restrictions on various water bodies that are developed. This particular project, I believe, came about because of DEQ, the Department of Health, the Wyoming Livestock Board, and various other cooperators have come up with a strategy to notify the public of various toxic levels in water bodies that have either been restricted or shut down completely, but they're lacking more information. In particular, this particular project is going to look at which lakes and reservoirs are most likely to have high toxin loads during blooms. A second important issue they're looking at is what methods and what sampling frequency are needed to understand the toxin presence. Currently, they don't know whether to sample, is it on a daily basis? Can it be on a weekly basis? At what levels do we have to increase the sampling methods in order to come up with information? And then what is the relationship between nutrient inputs, water temperatures, bloom formation, and toxin production? So those are the three main issues that this particular research proposal will address. Our second proposal, high resolution upland and riverbank erosion monitoring to inform best management practices that seek to reduce sediment accumulation at the Willwood Dam. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the problems that existed with the Willwood Dam and the sediment. And this particular project is looking to do increase understanding of sediment load sources within selected high priority contributing areas that will in turn aid local, state, and federal agencies in implementing best management practices to reduce sediment accumulation at Willwood Dam. In essence, they're going to work closely with the working groups that have been dealing with sediment in Willwood Dam. Results of what they do will also hopefully be able to be transmitted across the state and various other problem areas with sediment. So those are the two projects that were selected this year and what is in the MOU for your approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions, committee?
No, sir.
If there are no questions, I think we're ready for a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding for these two projects. We have that motion.
So move.
Moved by Representative
Summers.
Summers, seconded by,
Second.
yeah, Representative Larson.
Hey, you.
Discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and select committee members.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kerr. Okay, we're ready for 2023 construction projects agreements account 1. That's in tab H.
Mr. Chairman, we're gonna share their summary sheet. David's bringing it up.
Okay.
So these again are all the construction projects that came through the omnibus construction bill. And I won't get too in-depth on the process that they've gone through. I already kind of mentioned that when we talked about the planning projects, but the construction projects have come from planning projects. So they've been well vetted, and then they were considered along with planning projects at the November meeting in 2022, and then through the draft bills and throughout the committees and the legislature. So this really is just now for us to be able to execute those agreements with the individual project sponsors so we can get moving on those projects. If you want, I can basically read the summary table, or I can let you stare at that for a second. And see if there are any that you have particular questions on, or like I said, I can work my way down through that real quick and just go through them as well, whatever your pleasure is.
So do we have questions on this chart? Committee?
Mr. Chairman, yes, Senator Grew here. One question on the Goshen Irrigation Tunnel Level 3 project amendments. I don't see an amount there. What am I missing?
Mr. Chairman, what that was last session, there was 2.35 million appropriated to the project.
Right.
And 51% of that went towards a loan. And so we basically just restructured that. Well, 49% went to a 6733 grant loan. And then the other 51%, which was the Nebraska share, went to just a loan. And as you recall, the Nebraska found some funding from their side, and costs for design have gone up. Once the consultant actually had a better idea and started looking into this and having discussions with the Bureau and everybody. So that full 2.35 million is now just being changed to a 6733 grant loan. There's no additional funds. We're just restructuring the agreement.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can follow up. So where does that get us in that project? Since our good chairman is not with us today, I wanted to make sure I asked.
Mr. Chairman, could you repeat that question one more time? I didn't.
Just where are we in relationship to the whole tunnel rehab project?
So, Mr. Chairman, I believe they worked through with the funding they had available over the winter into about 30% design. They will be planning to do some field work this summer to get more information on the material that surrounds the actual tunnels and any other field information they'll need for design work. Complete the NEPA analysis, finish design this year, and I believe it was.
It should get us through pre-construction.
Yeah, the funding available will get us through pre-construction, and we'll be ready for construction after that. I've got a.
Mr. Chairman, this is Representative Summers.
Go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So you got a $32 million reservoir expansion on the list. Could you go in a little more detail on that project, the timeline, just where we're at, when we're going to spend the money? Is it to spend 32 million now? Are we at that point, or are we out there ways?
Mr. Chairman, on this one, the Levitt Reservoir Expansion Project, it actually went out to bid over a year ago, and the bids came in, or I should say the bid came in with more funding than we had. And during the last session, we asked for funds into the sponsors contingency fund for account 3, but the select water committee members at that time wanted to take the project through the legislative process because it was such a large increase in funds through the sponsor contingency from the bids we saw, that we wanted to bring it back through the process so it was very transparent to the entire legislature. So with that said, with this 32 million now from the sponsors contingency fund to that project, the sponsor should be able to go back out to bid this year on that. And if the bids come in good, and there's been some value engineering being done and trying to split the project up into different pieces so we can get some more local contractors involved as well, potentially to help with those bids, then we should be able to go to construction, I think, this year, assuming the bids come in well.
That answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole has a question.
Yeah, Senator Cole, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question on the Rock Springs project here, the Sweetwater County, projects, the Interstate INR ID Canal Phase 3, 2023. Is there a little bit of background on that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, so the Enterprise Irrigation and Reservoir Irrigation District project, I'll start with that one. Did you have another question on the Rock Springs project?
Yes, yeah, he does on the Sweetwater County one. It's about in the middle of the page there.
So I'll start with the Enterprise one. It's a district right down near the Utah-Wyoming border. The vast majority of irrigated acres are in Wyoming. There's a small portion in Utah. That's what we're talking about. Did you say interstate?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's right. Okay. The first phase of their project there is their diversion needed to be upgraded or replaced. And that was funded several years ago as phase one. And then the canal is pretty lengthy, so we've broken those up into two phases because just to give other sponsors a chance at funding, we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. But so phase two of the project was the first portion of the canal in the pipe, and then this third phase is the last portion of that canal in the pipe. And they also have federal funding through the Salinity Control Program, if I remember right, in the amount of, it'll be about 43.4% of their overall project cost for this phase three.
Follow up.
Yeah, follow up, Senator.
Yeah, just where in Sweetwater County? It's the largest county in the state. So could you give me a location of where we're talking about?
It's right on the Utah border. And isn't most of the reservoir system is in Utah,
Yeah, they have a small reservoir that's actually in Utah.
but the access to it probably only comes from the Sweetwater side of things. So, and the irrigation, I believe, is nearly all, if not all, Wyoming irrigators.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, if you drew a straight line between, well, took Washington and Manila and did this, that's about where it is.
Okay, just Washam, is that an identified area? I mean, is that where you're at there, like south of Washam? It's a little community down there.
I think so. I'm looking at the map and I'm having a hard time reading it. It's not the greatest clarity, but Manila is, I believe, in Utah. So it's north and west of Manila and south of Lyman. And I believe you had another question on Rock Springs.
No, it was just the identification of where the interstate INR project was.
Okay.
I find it funny, it's called interstate. Is that a combined group of projects? Or is this one project with that heading to it on it? Because you describe Washam, not anywhere else in the county. So you could help me with that.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, I believe it's probably interstate because a portion of their infrastructure is in Utah and a portion of the infrastructure is in Wyoming. But like I said, the vast majority of the irrigated acres are in Wyoming. So it's probably just a name they put together that described their entity.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions, committee? All right, so I think we're ready to vote on this block then? Do I have a motion to vote on this list of projects?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move the 2023 level 3 construction projects, agreements and amendments.
I'll second.
Okay. Been moved by,
Conrad.
okay,
McGrew.
by Conrad and McGrew. All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. We're ready for the next topic here.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, the next topic is item number 10. And that's prioritization of interim topics, the way it's listed on here, but I guess the last agenda item on the water development agenda was just pointing out our next commission meetings, commission select water committee meetings. And the next meeting will be on May 10th and 11th. For the new members, we typically will have a workshop to discuss any items that we think need a little bit more discussion than just in the meeting. In a workshop, kind of the afternoon before the meeting. So that would be the afternoon of May 10th. If we feel like we need that, once we get closer and know what agenda items we have, and then a meeting most likely in the morning, finishing up by noon on May 11th, and that will be at our office here in Cheyenne, or potentially at the Capitol complex if we can find a room down there working with LSO. And then the other one I'd like to point out, so I'm not sure what your agenda says, but the original one I think I see says May 12th, select water committee meeting. I think that's an error. There is no meeting on May 12th. And then in August, we have a meeting, and this is typically a meeting that we hold somewhere else in the state, usually at the direction of one of our commission members. And this particular meeting in August is going to be in the Cody Powell country. And what we'll do is we'll have a workshop again that first day. This is August 15th through the 17th. We'll have a workshop the afternoon of the 15th. Then on the 16th, we'll take the commission and the select water committee on a tour of that area, showing you different types of projects that the Water Development Office has worked on, and sometimes other entities' projects. And then on the 17th, we'll have a meeting, most likely wrapped up by noon, to take care of any official business we have. And I don't know that we need to go any further than the August meeting. And I would ask Senator Hicks if he wants to mention the September CSG meeting.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair and then Director. So those members of Select Water Committee, right now it doesn't show up on your legislative calendar, but I want you to get this down. We have a joint meeting with the Joint Ag Committee on the 12th of September in Pinedale. And then on the 13th of September, we will have a joint meeting and tour with the Council of State Governments West Colorado River Committee meeting. So plan on the 12th and the 13th of September in Pinedale. One joint meeting with the Joint Ag Committee, and then the next day will be with the CSG West Colorado River Forum. It will be in Pinedale this year, and we'll have Select Water Committee there for that. Representative Summers, you want to add anything to that?
No, I really appreciate Senator Hicks getting this together. I think it's really important for the other basin states to understand where their water comes from and the different complexities we have and the systems we have and how they differ. And I think it'll be good both for the committee to understand what happens in those lower basin states particularly, and how water is used. I think it'll be informative for everybody. So I appreciate Senator Hicks putting that together.
Representative Yen, you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just for those that don't know what it is, it's specifically a legislative groups from each state, and 2 legislators are appointed from each state to be part of that forum, so we can have discussions on whether we can come up with solutions and identifying what the problems are with the Colorado River. And the chair this year, there are 2 co-chairs. It is Senator Hicks and Assembly member from Nevada. And so we're hosting it this year in Wyoming.
Yeah, so we'll have representatives from California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado will all be there, be legislative members from each one of those states.
And this will be where?
And Pinedale. So
Okay, all right.
Chairman Eklund, we've got an ag meeting on the 11th and 12th. I think discussing will overlap a little bit
Right.
of that on the 12th with select water, and then the 13th. We'll have select water members stay that day to meet with the Colorado River Forum for CSG West.
Okay, well, that's what I thought. I maybe misunderstood.
Yeah, I
Part-
just wanted to get it on people's calendars because it isn't posted on the website or on water development at this point in time.
Okay, I guess a question I would have, when members are not able to make it to interim committee meetings, we're allowed to participate virtually again this year, aren't we? Albert, do you know much about that?
Mr. Chairman, we are, and I'm hopeful that our library has a big room, and they've been able to do. They've got all the gig necessary there, and they've got the equipment and everything to hold a meeting. So I think it'll be okay. One thing I would suggest, Senator Hicks, is, we need to get that room tied down sooner rather than later. And then to members of Select Water and to all the water folks, remember to get your reservations into hotels earlier rather than later, because during the summer we can get high volume in our hotels, and it can be kind of tough last minute.
Yeah, and I think we'll have, what we'll do is Representative Summer, I know David and Donna, if you can go ahead and get a block of rooms reserved. I know the Joint Ags meeting up there on Monday, Tuesday, Select Water will be Tuesday, Wednesday. We would hope those Ag members don't want to stay over, but if we can go ahead and get a block of rooms reserved now, and have LSO do that for the 11th, 12th, 13th, it would be very beneficial.
We
So
can do that, Senator Hicks. I also staff the Joint Ag Committee, so I'll work on that.
Okay, see if you can get that done, Dawn. It'd be very helpful.
So a question I would have, I don't know if we're far enough in the process, maybe management councils where I'll find out, will the Ag Committee, Joint Ag Committee be able to receive per diem? And probably need to ask management council about that. Does anyone know?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so, and then back to your original question, I think within our manual of legislative procedures as it comes to remote participation, that's up to the discretion of the chairman, whether they want to allow that or not. There is some rules that say you have to be, on screen. Anyway, but I would review that, but that's really going to be up to your discretion and Chairman Steinmetz as far as that participation. And then on your other issue, yeah, I think we include that. It's part of the normal ag, and what we may do is just ask for, usually on the scenarios like that, there's enough savings within your regular budget on these joint meetings to cover the cost of those committee members for a third day, but I would encourage you to ask for at least one extra day for this symposium, Chairman Eklund.
Okay. Any other business committee?
Mr. Chairman, just circle back real quick on Senator Cope's question on the interstate canal project, just west of McKinnon. Is where that irrigated land sits. So just want to cover that real quick.
Okay. Anything to add, water development? Okay. Well, thank you, committee. We are adjourned.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead. Whoever.
sorry, Mr. Chairman, David Hopkinson with LSO. It was on the agenda to finalize the interim topics for the Select Water Committee. So now that we've kind of moved on from what the Water Development Office had, I don't know how much time or if you wanted to address or formally organize the order of what topics the Select Water Committee would be addressing this interim.
I think we don't have the chairman here. So I'm not sure it's probably a good thing to go through that. We have a pretty good idea what we want to do there.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, this is Representative Summers. Yeah, I would just encourage you and the chairman and the vice chair, you guys select the priority. I don't know if I ever got it in, but I do believe, and I didn't see it on this list, even though the last meeting, I mentioned it again. And that was, I think the Colorado River and the issues behind it need to be forefront in what we do in this committee, other than the standard stuff. I think that needs to be an issue. That's part of the interim topic list.
Yeah, I think most of the committee will agree that will be in the front of things that we get done this year.
And
Any
then,
other?
Mr.
Go
Chairman,
ahead.
just one other thing, and as I think about this, and I'd ask the chairs to consider this, and as I went through this, which is my first real meeting on select water, obviously I voted on a lot of water projects. I've been beneficiary of a lot of water projects. But the small water project and how we vet that before the commission looks at it, I really would like some feedback from water development on whether it just seems, I think the way it was described to me by Senator Hicks, even though that wasn't accurate, seems like the best process, which is very similar to what the School Capital Facilities Commission, what they do. They vet projects that the department puts out, then the select committee looks at it. It's not much different than the large projects with that from the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund. There's a board that vets those projects that the agency brings out, and then the legislature approves those. This seems just a little bit opposite of what I think it should be. That it doesn't mean it hasn't worked forever and it won't continue to work forever, but it does just, I think the review of that and what may be a better process, I think would be important.
So, Mr. Chairman, a little bit on that, and just to throw in some food for thought out there is this, so if we use the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund analogy, those projects that are under 2,000, now under $400,000, never come to the legislature. Those are approved by that board. It was 200,000. We just raised that to 400,000. So only the large projects do we see there. I don't disagree with Representative Summers, but where we kind of fit into this thing, and it's just food for thought, when we get to November and we sponsor those water bills, what we do is approve the amount of money eligible in those programs. And that does go through the commission, through the omnibus bill, and then a recommendation to select water, and then to sponsor that legislation. So I think a little bit similar to the Wildlife Trust Fund is we don't oversee every $30,000 project that comes through there. So I don't know if that helps add any food for thought, but we do have a comparable process there, and maybe we need to just focus on the total amount of money available for the commission to then allocate for these small water projects. And I think originally that was the idea. We didn't want, so the idea is that if you brought 69 of these small water projects forward in an omnibus water bill that were debated, I think that was my recollection, the entire conversation. We've had upwards of 90 in 1 year. Some of them are $12,000. Do we really want the legislature's time debating 60 or 90 or 80 of these little projects? And that was the reason initially we set it up, that we would set amount of money in there and then it would go to the commission for approval versus the legislature. So just some food for thought as we move forward and look at comparable processes.
Okay, committee. And David, getting back to you, Senator Steinmetz and I will get together with you before we go before Management Council on prioritizing things. Did you have any other business for us?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Okay. All right. I believe we're done, committee. Thank you very much for your work.
Great, thank you.